Hey folks, it's Frederik from the FWX podcast. I want to talk to you about Star Wars, specifically Andor and Rogue One. And I want to start off with this picture I found on the internet by a guy who's credited here below, Jason Benulo. I found your art on Instagram, and I want to credit you with this poster because it's an amazing poster. And you see all the characters in here with what eventually it leads to the very thing in the back right here, the Death Star. Okay, so let's talk Andor. And first of all, I'm gonna give you the disclaimer. With moments, I'm gonna have to still look things up. So, and also my text is on the screen, so the screen and myself are gonna get the screen and I are gonna get a bit more brighter, so that's why. Okay, also I will be flubbing words, I will be making weird pauses, and occasionally I might swear. Doesn't always happen, but here's a disclaimer nonetheless. Okay, so let's start with season 1 of Andor. I gave you the poster already. I'm gonna intercut, by the way, with pictures of the people acting in this show in season 1 and season 2, and also the movie that comes after those two seasons, that being Rogue One. And first and for all, I think the main person you need to know about is the one you saw in the middle of that poster I just showed you. I'm gonna show you here on the picture of the cast I have here, played by Diego Luna. Almost missed his name there. Okay, so we start season 1 with the origins of Cassian, and also I have to tell you, by the way, there are a bunch of terms when it comes to Star Wars that I have to explain for those who don't know everything about Star Wars. But I'll be keeping it and saying it in a light way. Okay, so first of all, one of those terms is BBY, and Y with an Y. And it means before Battle Yavin. And that's also where we start here. In the 5 years before the Battle of Yavin, we find our guy, Cassian Andor, played by Diego Luna, on the planet of Marlana, where he's looking for his missing sister. And as he is investigating, he is discriminated by two Imperial officers, and they are wearing, to give you an idea of what they look like, they are wearing white suits, and they often have in a blaster is the word for a pistol with laser. They're wearing white suits with a blaster. Okay, and Cassian has an altercation with these two, and that leads to him accidentally killing one of those officers, and to leave no one and nothing behind, has to kill the other one too. And that leads to him fleeing Marlana 1, and where he goes to the planet Frederik, where he's trying to lay low and also meet the people that he knows best, including his adopted mother, Marva. And the actress playing Marva, you might know best by her role as Petunia in the Harry Potter movies. And Cassian also has a beloved droid, Bito Emo, or Bito Emo, and also his friend Brasso. And he's asking all three of them to cover for him for what happens. And while Cassian was on Marlana 1, he acquired something called a Starpath unit, which is a very valuable piece of Imperial technology used for navigating the galaxy. And there's another person that Cassian is very close to, and that is Bix, and he asks her to connect him with someone on the black market. And Bix, who sort of has, at first, not too many romantic feelings about Cassian, but she agrees to finally look for a black market buyer. In the meantime, her own boyfriend, Tim, a guy with double M in his name, becomes suspicious of Cassian. And in fact, he reports his suspicions to the authorities, specifically the Imperial authorities. Now, back on Marlana 1, they have their own kind of corporate police, and the corporate police has an inspector of security who, on his end, tries to cover up what happened. And he has this deputy called Cyril Karn, who is played by Kyle Soller in this series, who becomes more known as we see what happens in Season 1 and Season 2. And he wants to clear all this up and actually investigate what happens. And he wants to solve this case. He has this kind of desperate need to prove himself. But he's very stoic. He's very sterile, I would say. And so he finds out that Cassian was here on a ship, and he traces it to the planet of Frederik, and that Cassian is originally from a planet called Kenari. And episode 1 ends with a flashback of Cassian on Kenari, where he was known by another name, Casa. And he joins a group of kids as they're going off to a place not too far away to find a crashed ship. And as they do, Casa, or Cassian, has to say to his younger sister that she needs to stay at their camp while he goes looking for the ship with the group. Okay, so, and that's where episode 1 ends. And then we go over to episode 2 of season 1, and this is called That Would Be Me. And we start off with Bix's boyfriend, Tim, with the double M at the end, as he is still very suspicious of Cassian, and he has already reported him to Imperial authorities, but now also to their local corporate kind of police, the Primor Security, and he kind of has an in with them because they have a warrant out for his arrest. Yeah, I'm gonna give that ambiguous right now. You know what? I'll look it up for a moment. Primor Security. Who was the warrant on? My God, that's a long name. You know what? Let's skip it at that. Yeah. Okay, so there's a warrant out for, I think it was Cassian. And I'd say it like that because I didn't recently see season 1 again. Okay. And so Cyril goes there with his police group, and they form a kind of a joint task force with the person that leads the investigation on FWX. Yeah, a guy named Linus Mosk, Sergeant Linus Mosk. You know, as it comes to police, ranks are important. And they're trying to come up with a plan to arrest Cassian. And Cassian's droid B2 Emo or B2 Emo, or however you're supposed to say that damn name, informs Cassian and Marva of this warrant that is out, which causes Cassian to kind of freak out, and he starts to prepare to escape the planet. At the same time, Bix has found a buyer for Cassian's Starpath, a guy named Luthen Rael, and he has come to FWX to obtain the Starpath unit. And then we get another flashback where the tribe on Kenari, where Cassian is from, where he was known as Casa, locates and investigates the ship that has crashed, not very close to a mine, basically, that has been largely abandoned. And here I can set a thing right. As they're investigating this ship, one person of the tribe unfortunately gets killed by someone that was in this ship that has crashed. And in response to the killing, the tribe kills this attacker and then goes away from the crash site. But Cassian, or Casa, stays around to look around if there is nothing else nearby, and he goes into the ship, and that's where we end episode 2. And we're going to episode 3 called Reckoning now, with Luthen arriving on FWX, and he meets Cassian in an abandoned factory. And around the same time, we find Syril and Mosk in a kind of joint task force looking around. And they go and ask Cassian's mother figure, Marva, but she refuses to help. And to get any further, they kind of like in a real world stay close to the tech that they have to get more clues, and that's how Syril pinpoints Cassian's location through a transmission that Cassian has made to his droid. Okay, because Cassian wants to just sell the Starpath thing that he has and get to leave the planet. But Luthen it gets very clear with Cassian, and he tries to persuade him into joining his network of rebel spies. And he lauds Cassian for his success of stealing and sabotaging Imperial ships. And at that moment, the task force, as it were, raids the factory, and the two of them escape to a place where you have it's called speeders, which is sort of like a motorized cycles and motorcycles. I basically said the same thing there, didn't I? It's called a speeder, and there's a hangar where they escape to. And as they do this, they subdue Syril even as they get out, once again proving their worth. And as this goes on, Bix learns of what Tim has done, having reported Cassian to both the Imperial forces and the local police, and she decides to choose for Cassian instead of Tim, and she tries to go to him, but she's stopped by the people looking for Cassian. These same officers, this task force basically, that has been made between the two forces on the planets. And in this process, unfortunately, Tim is killed by these officers. As that happens, Cassian's good friend Brasso sabotages and destroys the vehicle that these security officers from Morlana 1 came in. Okay. So the officers don't get to go away, but Luthen and Cassian do. While these two police forces have to band together, and the two leaders, Cyril and Mosk, they request evacuation. And this is the point where it starts to become known to the larger forces, to the Imperial forces. And here we get another flashback of Marva and her husband Clem as they go into the ship that the tribe has found on Canary, and they find Cassian in there. And Marva has very strong motherly feelings and decides to take Cassian with her to where it is they are from. FWX, most likely. And that's where episode 3 ends. And so we go to episode number 4, called Aldhani, which is the planet that Luthen takes Cassian to. And he asks Cassian to help here on a mission, a robbery mission. But Cassian isn't quite sure yet because he has just agreed to this, but he does agree to do this mission. And Luthen, who knows the value of secrecy, asks Cassian to choose basically an undercover name. And Cassian chooses the name Clem as a way of honoring his adoptive father. And they meet. I should have, you know what? I'll show you the cast for a moment. So, Cassian, played by Diego Luna. That's this guy right here. For all those who don't know, Luthen Rael is played by Stellan Skarsgard, Papa Skarsgard, aka Papa Skarsgard. And then we meet Vel, played by Faye Marsai, Vel Sarfa, and she is the leader of the group on Aldhani. And she introduces Cassian to the group, but keeps the secrecy that Luthen has among the groups that he commands, basically. And she and the group tell Cassian what they are about to do. And they're about to take a lot of money from the Imperial sector being a collection of the planets that they belong to, Aldhani being part of the system where they are. Okay. And they're gonna take all that money from the Imperial sector in the supply hub on Aldhani, and to get away from the supply hub, they're gonna take advantage of a very rare phenomenon in the sky above Aldhani. And they have to do this because their getaway vehicle is a very slow kind of vehicle. Okay, and then we cut to Coruscant, where Luthen shows his more elaborate and nuanced side as an antiquities dealer, which is a front for his business as the cell leader for all the spies that he sites. Yeah. And he meets somebody else there, very important figure in Star Wars. And before I do that, I'm gonna take a sip. Right. And then this next figure is a very important one, and a very known one if you have watched stuff from Star Wars. And that is, let's see if I have a good picture here. Yeah, probably here. So it's this lady right here, Mon Mothma, and this character is played by Genevieve O'Reilly, who I have a picture here of. It's this lady right here, okay? And they get to talk into how they're gonna keep their opposition to the Empire, to the end of the Emperor, hidden. Meanwhile, at the same time, we find that Cyril is also on Coruscant, where he is basically lectured by his mother for getting fired at his job. And we learn a bit more about Cyril in this moment, in that he's basically a mama's boy. That's what it comes down to. And there's another person that we meet here on Coruscant, a lady named Dedra Miro, who is a lieutenant for the ISB, the Imperial Security Bureau, which is basically like an FBI kind of agency. And she has become aware of what has happened on Frederik, and she wants more power. She needs more access and authority to know about what has happened. But she is held up by someone else, another colleague of hers, who has more authority. And that's where episode 4 ends. And we go to episode 5, which is called The Axe Forgets. And so we go back to Aldhani, where Cassian Andor, his undercover name, is hiding his past from his fellow rebels. And most of them are not that trustful of him, especially someone named Skeen, while another one of them, Taramin, and I don't have a picture of them to show you, Taramin is training Cassian and the other rebels for the heist that they're about to do. And that's where everything starts, and we see them going to the place where all that money is. And while they are traveling, Cassian has this moment where he does reveal that he, in fact, is a mercenary, which comes to light for Vel, and she manages to keep him from spilling too many secrets. But unfortunately, there is something that either of them do not know, and that is that there is a goddamn double agent on the group, Lieutenant Gorn. And then we get back to Coruscant on this episode, where Cyril is discussing a potential new job with his mother in her place. Well, he is eating, as we see in the scenes with him. Anyway. And we get to see... maybe... I haven't... Yeah, I'm gonna show you who is played by Cyril again, Pascal Soler. And by the way, the woman playing Cyril's mother is Catherine Hunter. For those who do know, okay. And everybody on Coruscant is kind of dealing in ways that we kind of know in real life. For instance, Mon Mothma, who has a weird relationship with her husband, Perrin, and also her daughter, Leda. Was because she's trying to do so many different things, like establishing a new foundation. While this is happening, we cut to Supervisor Blevin from the ISB as he is seizing a hotel on Frederik as a new ISB headquarters. And in the meantime, so he's the senior officer that Dedra is dealing with, Dedra Miro, and she herself has an assistant called Heert, as they are trying to get to the conclusion of what exactly is happening. And they do come to the conclusion that there are rebels conducting a bunch of things like a heist of Imperial weapons and technology. And we end the episode with Luthen waiting for a transmission from Vel and her team. And that's the Axe for Cats, episode 5. We go into episode 6, called The Eye. And here we get the operation of the heist. And the group, the rebels, break into the place. Hold up a second. Here, everything is coming together for a moment. So, I've told about Gorn before. Oh, yeah. He is the double agent on the team. And the place where they are going to is being fortified and held by Imperial troops. And the leader there is Commandant Jeholt Bihaz, who is the double agent's leader. The handler, basically. And what happens here is that, well, while they're infiltrating, they take the commander's family as hostages and get Bihaz to force, and I'm gonna rephrase. So the rebels infiltrate the place, they take the family as hostage in an effort to give the commander to give over his access to the vault with all the money that they will want to have. And as it is happening, as they're transferring every unit, every credit is the currency in Star Wars, they are found by Imperial forces. And in this conflict, both the double agent and Termin are killed in the firefight that happens. And another person on the group called Cinta is not able to get on the ship. So only the others, Cassian, Skeen, Vil, and somebody else called Nemec, who even has a manifesto, which is a bit much for a rebel. They get on the ship with everything that they have, and they escape off Aldhani. Unfortunately, as they do, our boy Nemec is absolutely crushed by all the money that is not tied down. So everything is just loose on the ship that they have. And he gets crushed by the incredible amount of money that they have. And he has... It's unsure if he lives or not. And with all that they have, they land on a planet called Fresno, which ironically is also a real place on our Earth, with it being written in a different way, because in the show this is called Fresno with a Z. And they're trying to get Namek to a medic to treat him. And this is kind of where the group splits even more, as Vel is looking after Namek, while Skeen basically crosses the group, and Skeen proposes to Cassian that they actually go off-world with the money that they have gathered. But Cassian is so emotional from what has happened that in the moment he kills Skeen. And just a bit after that, Cassian tells Vel what has happened. And he tells her of the plans that he was gonna do with the money. And as Cassian is leaving, Vel gives him the manifesto that Namek had, as Namek before in the last episode, or it all ties together. So Cassian gets the manifesto from Namek. Meanwhile, back in Coruscant, the ISB is trying to get around exactly to what has happened here. Because either sides, but I'm gonna rephrase, both sides don't really know what has happened, except for Luthen, and he is quietly celebrating what has happened despite the little backlash that has happened, because not everyone survived. But that's also the point of the show and of the season in its whole, is that rebellions can't live if people aren't willing to give their lives for it. And that is very much part of the show here. And you'll see even more of that when we get into season 2. Okay, let's go to episode 7. And that is called Announcement. And here we meet up with Cyril, as he has gotten a new job at the Bureau of Standards, which is what I think kind of like a mathematics kind of class, but then as a job, like statistics basically, like crunching numbers. And we get a bit more information from other people too, like a known figure called Wolf Yularen, who tells, and Wolf Yularen, by the way, is part of the ISB. He's one of the high-ranking members. He's a colonel, and he tells that they have gained more power. They have more surveillance and authority now. And at this point, there's a bit of a back and forth between that Ramiro and Blevin, her colleague, that she's kind of clashing with, because she has broken protocol for accessing stuff she wanted, but really had no it's authorization. It's a tough word to say, folks. So Dedra has no authorization to access specific kind of data, because she does not have the clearance. I should have just said clearance. Anyway. But she does persuade the person in command of the ISB, of the group, of the council, and she does get oversight of the planet of Frederik. Meanwhile, even more on Coruscant, Luthen has an assistant called Clea, who is played, I'm going to show you another picture, Elizabeth Delau, who plays Clea Markey. That's this woman right here. That's Luthen's assistant, yeah. Gonna rephrase for a moment. So, Luthen has an assistant called Clea. I just showed a picture of her. And she is a very protective of Luthen. And she instructs Vel, who I've shown before, but I'll show again, played by Faye Marsai. And she gives Vel the job to go and kill Cassian, as he knows who Luthen is. And then, even more in Coruscant, we see that Mon Mothma meets with an old friend of hers called Tay Kolma, who's also a banker, and she asks him for help to her own family funds. And then we go back to another planet. We go back to Frederik, where Cassian returns, and he needs to settle some old debts, but at the same time he learns that people have blamed him for what is happening right now, in that more security was added by the Imperial forces on Frederik, and the people blame him for it. And in a way, Cassian does not blame them, because he knows how the presence of the stormtroopers, which are here's a picture of them. Here's a picture of the cast. It's these guys. Those are the stormtroopers. And the stormtroopers, at one point, they killed Cassian's father, Clem, during a protest on a place on Frederik called Riggs Road. And Cassian is trying to get Marva to leave with him, but she really wants to stay, and she opposes actually what is happening with the Imperial forces. And there's this growing revolt on Frederik, and you see that in scenes of the series in this episode. Meanwhile, Cassian leaves Frederik again, to a place called Naimos, which is a kind of touristy, tropical kind of planet. And here he adopts another name, Keith Girgo. I hope I said that right. But here, apparently, there are still Imperial forces too. And here he is arrested because he was on the beach on this planet, and he was walking, and he is just unjustly arrested by the Imperial forces, and he is sentenced to 6 years of imprisonment. And here we go to episode, and that closes episode 7. And then we go to episode 8, dubbed Narkina 5, and that is the prison that Cassian is brought to. And here he discovers that it's not just it's not just a prison, it's a labor camp where he and thousands of other prisoners are put to work doing things for the Empire. And here he meets somebody, the manager of the prisoners, or I'm gonna cut in with a little MCU joke here. In the Thor Ragnarok movie, they use a different name for slaves called prisoners of jobs. And the head prisoner of job in this place, in Narkina 5, is a guy named Kino Loy, and I should have, or maybe I still do, a picture of this person, because Kino Loy is played by the one and only Andy Serkis, who, even as a prisoner, is the manager for what exactly they have to do. That being putting something together. And you have scenes of them putting everything together, and it's like a very close circuit kind of work, very machinery kind, almost like in a real factory where people put things in pieces. Yeah. And then we get back to other places like Avel and Cinta from the rebel group that we met on Aldani, and they travel to FWX to find Cassian. And unfortunately, on FWX, Marva has gotten ill. And here's where we see things start to fall apart, actually, for Cassian's close ones, his relatives, and the people he loves. As Marva has gotten sick, and Bix, who also knows Marva, is trying to contact her, the person that she got Cassian to know about Luthen. But Luthen is so all about his secrecy and is constantly worrying that he will get exposed, so he does not answer Bix. And then we get back to Luthen, who is meeting with Saul Guerrera. And I have a picture of this man too. And Saul Guerrera, by the way, also played by one incredible actor, Mr. Forrest Whitaker, right here. And Luthen wants to hire Saul Guerrera's group, his rebel cell, for a new mission where they get to act as air support on a power station on a different planet called Spellhouse. Well, an Imperial power station at Spellhouse. And by the way, this is also organized by a guy named Anto Krieger. The Guerrero says, no, I'm not gonna do that. And so Luthen is sent away. And then we cut back to Coruscant for a moment back, where Del Ramiro meets Cyril Karn, and she asks him about his experiences on FWX. and he is still very much. He still wants to prove himself despite having failed his previous mission. And because of this failure, she decides that he is not going to help her with her investigation. So she gets a unit of the ISB to Frederik's, and here she finds Bix and arrests her. And that's where we stop. That's where episode 8 stops, which is pretty much a prison. I'm gonna tell you a bit about this kind of episode. So it's a bit of a there's a, but I'm gonna call it a sort of subgenre where you meet everyone in one place, but obviously there's more than that happening, of course. But a prison style kind of movie or TV series does frequently happen. I've seen this happen in a superhero show called Arrow, where it happened almost exclusively for one season. Of course, there's also the other very famous prison series, Prison Break, with the character of Michael Scofield. And there's more, of course, of like that, of a one room kind of scenario. Okay, so let's continue to episode 9, called Nobody's Listening. So, the group that Dedra has, that is in Frederik's right now, there is a scientist part of this group, and he's called Dr. Gorst. And he has his work full, as he is he very much has to do the dirty work, and has to torture Bix for information, just to know more about what Cassian has been up to. But unfortunately, they learn nothing. Well, Dedra has dubbed the figure behind all of this, all the cells. She has given this person behind it a name, Axis, because of the lack of Bix's knowledge, basically. A bit more interesting, and also information relevant to the previous episode. The ISB has captured a rebel pilot from the Krieger group. And this pilot reveals that there was a raid on the power station on Spellhouse. We get back to Coruscant, where Mon Mothma meets with Vel, the rebel. But it turns out that they're actually related. They're family. And Vel is Mon Mothma's cousin. So, to bring up the pictures again. So this one and this one know each other. They are family. And because it's Coruscant, and it's because in the Empire they need to keep a low profile. Because this is such a different life for Vel, who is more of a pragmatic and an operative, basically. Someone who needs to be active and be out in the fields. So she needs to lay low. And while this is happening, Mon Mothma and her friend Tacoma continue to get funds for the rebel activities. And we get back to the prison on Narkina 5, where someone on the crew named Ulav has been taken away by a prison medic named Dr. Rashiv when Ulav has just suffered a massive stroke. And because of this massive stroke, Ulav is euthanized. As, by the way, days away from getting out of that place. Meaning there's only one or two ways to getting out of this prison. Either because you have done all the Empire has asked of you, or in a box. And at this point, Cassian Andor, played by the amazing Andy Serkis, discover a very disturbing rumor in that someone who has just completed their sentence was actually just sent to a different part of the prison to work on something else. And in the process, I'm gonna give you a bit more information. So, Cassian and Kino Loy learn of this happening, of someone getting out but actually having to work somewhere else in the prison. But that comes laid bare. They are discovered in some way, which leads the people responsible for the prison to kill everyone on the place where that other person was said to be going on, but actually working on another level. So all the people on that level are just killed to cover up what was happening there, which is awful. And the both of them, Cassian and Kino, they realize that what I just said, either you go out and actually get to work on a different part of the prison, or you really do come out in a box. And so they start to formulate a plan of escape. And that's where this episode ends. And then we go to episode 10, One Way Out, which by name you can already guess basically means the escape from the prison. And that's where we start, as Cassian has disabled a water pipe and has flooded the place where they are supposed to be working. And he gets the security system offline, which allows the other groups of prisoners to overpower the guards and escape. And in the process, maybe even gain a weapon and try to fight the people there. And so there's just this mass revolt of the prison, where we see scenes of them getting out. And in this process, they also take control of the intercom system, especially Kino gets to, and he has this amazing speech where Andy Serkis once again shows off his acting chops. And so there's this mass revolt happening at the prison where a lot of them are getting out. Only we get to know as they are escaping that apparently Kino can't swim. And this prison is like a floating thing around in basically like a floating island on a pond, a large pond. Or more like a lake. But Cassian... So, I'm gonna get back to that for a moment. So on this floating island thing, Kino tells Cassian that actually he can't swim, so he stays behind. Okay. But Cassian does. And he gets away. He reaches land. And then we go back to Mon Mothma on Coruscant. and she meets somebody else, Davo Scullen, who is a bit of a gangster and a businessman, but he is unsure of financing the projects that she is keeping, that being the rebel activity. But the only way for him to work with her is for her to arrange a meeting with her daughter and his son, which, well, Mon Mothma, by the way, is from the planet of Chandrilla, and in her culture, she knows that the meeting between a daughter and a son from a different family, is basically the very first step towards marriage. And we get to another place on Coruscant where Luthen meets up with apparently someone that he has had for a long time, a supervisor in the Imperial Security Bureau called Lonnie Young, who has been informing Luthen on all types of ISB activities, and they have a talk, quite a serious talk, and here we get another amazing speech from Mr. Stellan Skarsgard as Luthen, which you really have to watch, and that's where that episode ends, as they are conferring about just how trapped they are and what they are doing. And so we go to episode 11, called Daughter of Frederik, referring to Marva, who, unfortunately, because of the illness, has died. And this has prompted a ceremonial funeral for her on Frederik. And this happens for her because she was known among the people of Frederik. And this has the actual support of Del Ramiro of the ISP, because she is hoping that Cassian will come to their aid. And Vel, Mon Mothma's cousin and the rebel group leader from earlier, informs Luthen's assistant Clea about what has happened, about Marva's death. And Clea learns from Vel that Mon Mothma is about to marry off her daughter to secure funding for the Rebel Alliance through Davo Scullen. And because of this, Mon Mothma's daughter, Leda, starts to get to know more about her own culture and traditions, which is distressing for Mon and Vel because it's a very rigid but also kind of beautiful in a way. And in the scenes you really see how different it is from other cultures in the Empire and in the galaxy. Okay. And there's another person who learns about Marva's funeral, and that is Cyril. And he learns about it from his previous task force comrade, Linus Mosk. And then we got back to a moment from an earlier episode where Saul Gerrera, Forrest Whitaker's character, does decide at the very last moment to come to Krieger's aid and attack Spellhouse. But he does get a lot of what's the word? Well, let's just say that Luthen is not for this idea. And with the very meaning that actually this might be a trap that the ISB has set for them. And so Luthen returns back to Coruscant, where he neatly escapes an Imperial patrol, and in the process also gets to destroy a couple of starships being little ships in the galaxy from the Empire that destroy other starships, and also a tractor beam. And tractor beam is basically like holding in a ship from a much bigger ship. Okay. Ooh, here we get another. So, as Cassian has escaped Narkina 5, he has help from two people, Dewey and 3D. No relation. That's a joke. And also another person, Ruskot Melshi, who is an important figure later for Cassian. And the four of them are able to escape from Narkina 5. And they travel back to that same place where Cassian got himself arrested, actually, Niamos, for all his belongings that he unfortunately has left there, that they have taken off of him. And there he learns that his adoptive mother, Marva, has unfortunately passed away from her sickness. And at that point, Melshi and Cassian part ways, with every intention to expose what the Empire is doing, including the very unjustifiable prison system. And that's where the 11th episode of Andor Season 1 ends. And we cut to the finale of Season 1, called Rick's Road. And so, as Dedra has suspected, Cassian does return to Ferrix for the funeral of Marva. And here he also learns that Bix has been imprisoned by the ISB. And as expected, the ISB is intending to use the funeral to capture Cassian and to question him for following Luthen's work as the person that they have dubbed Axis. But here there's another wrinkle where Luthen has been advised by Vela and Cinta, the two rebels that he commands, to kill Cassian, basically, to stop him from divulging any secrets that Cassian knows. And then we come back to the attack on Spellhouse, where the ISB troops succeed in stopping the attack, but unfortunately they leave no one alive, which greatly angers Dedra because she wants information. And then we come back to the two kids, Leda and the son of Davos Skelden, for a moment as they meet for the first time. And then we cut to the funeral, where the droid of Cassian, B2EMO, displays a recording of Marva in another brilliant speech done by the actress that portrays Marva as a rallying cry to fight against the Empire. And this, in fact, does create a very big riot. And in this confusion, Cassian manages to rescue Bix, while the ISB forces are just overwhelmed by the force of nature that the people of FWX are. And Cyril is I'm gonna rephrase for a second. So in this conflict between the people of FWX and the Imperial troops and the ISB, Cassian gets Bix from the place where she was being kept, and Cyril Korn, who has joined Devra Miro, and he saves her from being attacked by the mob of people from the planet of FWX. I said that really. Anyway, as they are escaping, Cassian convinces the people left on FWX and the droids, especially Brasso and his droid. Cassian convinces them to take Bix away from FWX. And he gets out too. Cassian also escapes. Well, he doesn't just escape. He escapes with Luthen, who has been waiting for him by the ship. And here, Cassian basically gives Luthen an ultimatum, either to kill him or to take him in. And that makes Luthen smile, because he's satisfied that he has this new pawn in his chess set. And we get a post-credits scene at the end of this episode where the machinery that was being built by the prisoners on Arkina 5 are parts for the firing dish of the very thing that this is all leading to, right here in the background of this amazing poster, the Death Star. And that's where season 1 ends. So that is all you need to know about season 1 of Andor. Thank you so much for listening already. I'm gonna do the next episode in a moment. So thank you very much for listening and watching. You can like and subscribe. And I hope to see you in the next part. See you soon.